Hi, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show. If you're new to my channel or you've been watching and you haven't subscribed, please hit subscribe. We'd greatly appreciate it. I'm doing this like a year and a half. I have about 400 subscribers, which is great. But the more subscribers, the more chance my channel will grow, and then more people will become notice of it. So we'd greatly appreciate that. So when I talk to young people today, a lot of times they're like, well, how did you get into new music in the 70s? There was no computer, no internet. How did you find information on new bands? It's a great question. And what you're seeing right here are two of favorite ways that I used to do it, amongst others. So, of course, back then you had the radio, and the radio was a lot better than it is now. They would play much larger set lists, bands. They would experiment more. They would actually play new albums in their entirety. They would have broadcast concerts, so you could discover new music by radio, and they would also be local, so local radio stations would play local bands. Much different time on radio than it is now. Of course, buying records back then was a different thing. Thankfully, depending on where you live, you may still have record stores, and for me, my life never changed. I still every week go to record stores and go through the bins and look through the used sections and try to find deals and cutouts. So it wasn't a really big commitment back then. Even a new album back then was like $4.98, so it wasn't bad. Concerts were huge back then. I used to go to a lot of concerts. Concerts were like $8, $8.50 in the 70s. Towards the 80s, they were like $12. So you can go to a lot of shows, and you would see the opening bands, or at least I would. And I discovered tons of great bands, especially in Southern rock. I remember seeing like Wet Willie opening up for the Allman Brothers, and the Atlanta Rhythm section opening up for this band, and Grinder Switch. So bands you would hear about, you'd get to see them because they'd be the opening band. And it wasn't a big commitment. I would go to like 3-4 shows a month on a really busy month. So you had a little bit of TV. We had 6 TV channels back then, but you had things like Don Kirshner's Rock Concert, In Concert on ABC, the Midnight Special. A Midnight Special especially, the bands had to play live, so you really had to have chops as opposed to just lip syncing. So that would be another way to experience new music. And of course, if you had friends and they would turn you on to new music and albums that they bought, and you'd hang out and they'd put, you'd play records, in the background or whatever, or even like we'd call like a listening party and we'd play like a new album. So there was lots of ways to experiment. But two of my favorites were, I was a huge magazine guy, and I still have them. I have literally, here's really famous ones. Which one is this one? Here's a Hit Parader, and I have a ton of those, and Hullabaloo, which later became Circus magazine. I have hundreds of these things. Creem magazine and Circus, these were two of my favorites, and they were very different. Of course, Rolling Stone magazine was a good magazine back then. And the thing about these magazines were they're loaded with ads. That's all you had is articles on bands that you heard of or never heard of, and just tons of advertisements. And sometimes you'd have like an ad like this from a record label, and they would show you a bunch of new releases, which was kind of cool. And what else? See, I paperclipped a couple of these things. What's this one? Let's see. Oh, you also had record clubs. I was a huge record club guy. So this one is the Circus Record Club. So Circus Magazine back in 1971 had their own record club, and you could buy a certain amount for $9.96, and you'd get a bunch. And they even threw it in the new Rolling Stones 45, and then you had to buy a couple for free. A lot of people have heard of like Columbia House. I think I might have a couple of ads. But these things are just loaded with ads, and bands you would hear of but didn't get played on the radio. West Bruce and Lang, they didn't get any radio play even back then. Here's an RCA Records, ad showing the new Bowie album and Pure Prairie League. So, when you would read these magazines, you were just surrounded by ad after ad. And that's why, the marketing was important. Then there was import services where you can get import albums for really cheap. They send in a couple of bucks and you get these import albums. And sometimes if you subscribe to the magazine, they would give you a free record. Here's a couple there. Here's an old Hit Parader with Mick Jagger on the cover. And here's an ad for Columbia House. Right? Is this Columbia House? 12 records for $3.98. And they're good records. Really good records. And then you'd have to buy a certain amount more. And I love these. I can still remember to this day, you're in order to get those box of 12 records, and there's a couple I remember to this day. My Nose Lofgren video talk about that was from Columbia House. Full page ads, new Moody Blues album. So not only would they talk about the releases, but just constant barrages of cool ads and record reviews. And this is how you would get turned on through these great, great magazines. These were my Bible, and I still have them. But another thing that you see next to me that was interesting is this. Here's an ad for an album called The Big Ball. And what the hell is that, you're saying? Well, some of the record labels, especially Warner Brothers, has a ton of them. And in fact, The Big Ball, I have it. Where is it? There it is. They would do what they call lost leaders, and for $2, you would send in $2 in an envelope, and they would send you these albums. And these albums were double albums, and really, really nice. We had booklets in them. This whole thing just cost $2. And what they were doing is sending you, they would put together a compilation of some of their new upcoming releases, songs. And sometimes they were deep, sometimes they were B-sides. Like, look at this Kinks one here, and I remember this. So the Kinks, where is it? Right there, they're pushing the album Arthur. But the song that's on there is When I Turn Out the Living Room Light, which is not even on Arthur. It was like an unreleased track, like a B-side. So these were really, really cool ways of experiencing new and upcoming bands that you wouldn't get any play even back then. The Pentangle, there's Fleetwood Mac with the song Oh Well, Van Morrison. So they would release these, and I think this was the very first one. And it was so successful, they just did a ton of them. So here's one called the 1969 Warner Reprise Record Show. And look at the bands: the Mothers of Invention, Van Dyke Parks, Joni Mitchell, Jethro Tull, Neil Young, the Kinks, Jimi Hendrix. Just really, really cool stuff. And sometimes they'd be different mixes because the albums were not even out yet. And they got great liner notes, as you can see. And for $2, you'd mail it in, you'd get it in the mail. And here was a way to experience new upcoming music. Some of it not so good maybe to your taste. Some of it, there's the Fugs. I mean, this is a mixture of just tons of different stuff. Here's another one called Menu, Hot Platters. Now this one I remember is the inner gatefold. And they're all double albums. Look at this. That's not me crossing it out. They spelled Deep Purple wrong. Strange Kind of Woman. T-Rex. Hot Love, Randy Newman. But look at that Kinks song. Can you see that Kinks song? It says Animals in the Zoo. They don't have a song called Animals in the Zoo. That, of course, is Ape Man from the Lola album. But, really, they don't even have the song title right because it was way before the album came out. Fanny, which was an all-female girls rock and roll band long before the Go-Go's. Warner Brothers, a lot of these are Warner Brothers. Here's another one called Limo. So these were record company, record label promo albums. For $2, you'd send it in through the magazine, and they'd mail you these albums, all double albums. Really tremendous variety. Here's another one. The 1969 Warner Reprise songbook, 23 different acts, 40 selections, old and new. Look at that lineup. The Electric Prunes, Sweetwater, Eric Anderson, Family. It's all over the place. Neil Young. Here's another one. The whole Burbank catalog. And again, beautiful booklet inside. Of course, this stuff is really old. This is my originals from way back in the day. Some of them a little bit damaged. But Really cool. Captain Beefheart. I remember one of them had a whole side of Captain Beefheart for their upcoming release, Trap Mask Replica. An album that I never really got, but you know, what can I tell you? Different tastes. The whole Burbank catalog. Now they weren't the only one. Then you got Atlantic Records came into it. Atlantic had a great label. And here's one called By Invitation Only. And look at the track listing on this. So we would open it up. Here's the gatefold. Again, this cost $2. Mail it in. They mail it out to you as a lost leader to turn you on. Look at what they were promoting. Led Zeppelin, Whole Lotta Love. The Stones, It's Only Rock and Roll. Stephen Stills. Buffalo Springfield. Yes. ELP. Led Zeppelin. Delaney and Bonnie. Pretty Things. This is a tremendous... These are great listens. But the idea was send them $2 and they'll send you a compilation of upcoming releases. Here's another one from Atlantic. Heavies for September from Atlantic Atco, Rolling Stones. And this one had Dancing with Mr. D as the lead-off track for Goat's Head Soup. But Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, Michael Oldfield. This was just a really cool way to experience new music at $2. And this is what the record labels would do. Here's another one called Schlagers. This, I think, actually was the very first one ever done. This was also Warner Brothers. So again, with the booklet inside, with, you know, different selections from all different artists from Warner Brothers. I never really hear people talking about that. In fact, even Capricorn Records got into it. And here's one that I have called Pick of the Crop Peaches, Volume 2. Capricorn, a great Southern rock label, and really cool stuff on this album. You know, you could see Capricorn, Wet Willie, and Bobby Whitlock, Greg Allman, the Allman Brothers, Hydra. You know, if you're a Southern rock fan, you loved Capricorn, Marshall Tucker Band, Wet Willie, and more. So these were really, really cool, and I never hear anybody talking about record label promo albums from the 70s. But there you are. And to me, and the Circus magazine, and Creem magazine, and Hit Parader, and Rolling Stone, and listening to the radio, and going to concerts, that's how you discovered new music. And it was active. You were actively reading and actively going, and it wasn't expensive. You know, what the hell did Circus magazine cost 75 cents? You know, even then, that wasn't a lot of money. $2 for these albums. Great way to experience new music. So there you have record label promo, record company promo albums from the 70s. A brief look at Creem and Circus magazine, my Bibles from the 70s, and how we would experience new music before computers and the internet and Spotify. It was a good time back then. Hope you enjoyed this. Please hit subscribe. Check out my other videos. Tell your friends. Please help me let this channel grow, and I'll continue to do programming and start to dig into my archives of over 5,000 albums and thousands of magazines I have, and cuttings, and I have every ticket stub of every concert I ever went to from the early 70s onward. Pretty cool stuff. Hope you enjoy it. Most importantly, stay safe. I just came back from Tennessee, and I came back with COVID. My whole family got COVID. So this is my first video in a week, but I'm doing better. Although a week later, I'm still positive, so go figure. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe. Stay well. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.